All right. Good morning, Shiva. How are you?
Very good, Andrew.
All
Sorry.
right. Hey. So thanks everybody for joining. If this is your first partner call, my name is Andrew Morgan. I help with the CyberCNS team with go-to-market. If you've been with us for a while, this will be a tad iterative, but just to give you a quick rundown of the agenda, Shiva is going to go over the latest updates. We've got some big ones. Excited to hear about them, Shiva. I'll keep an eye on chat. Send us questions and Q&A. Just be patient. Obviously, sometimes it really kicks up. I'll do my best to having conversations with one another, and who has questions at appropriate time, I'll jump in and ask Shiva certain things. If not, I'll just wait till he's done, and then we'll open it up for general Q&A.
Yes. So
no worries. We can see you. And let's see. Okay, got it. So perfect. You're on slideshow.
Yeah. So good morning, everyone. So this is basically a kind of we've been a little in the hibernation mode for some time to essentially work out a few things, and I'm hoping that through this call I can walk you through what are the things that we are basically what we've completed, what we are basically going to be doing over the course of the next few weeks, and I would basically like your honest and candid feedback in terms of how things are going. So first things first, basically, we were talking about basically a single sign-on portal, which basically is a Kubernetes-based architecture, which is basically centrally controlled, and plus basically it is deployed across 8 regions, has high failover. So the current architecture essentially had basically each of you having an individual server, which essentially kind of works for certain scenarios. But then essentially as the load increases and the number of people who basically get onto the system increase, we basically are not able to provide auto-scaling features that is required for you on that type of a platform. So in order to essentially kind of eliminate that bottleneck, we basically started working on this a couple of months back. We believe we would be able to get done with this fairly quickly, but we kind of hit a lot of issues, especially because when we are going into Kubernetes, and there are a lot of unknowns. And second is that we kind of did a complete load testing, because earlier each of you had your own dedicated instance. So essentially we didn't have to worry about too many people logging into a single system. However, we don't want our systems to essentially be the center of discussions about it's something being down again on a particular day. But basically we do get a few systems which go down on a one-off basis, especially when the load is very high. And that basically is something that we've been working with Amazon on, because they've not been able to fix the issue. But what we believe is that by migrating everybody onto this new Kubernetes-based architecture, where essentially you have auto scaling, and basically we have new containers that are spun up as soon as the load increases, and then it will be scaled back down when the load decreases. So we tested the entire auto scaling feature, and each cluster is basically tested for basically 600 users logging in at the same time. So that's essentially how we're doing it. But what we essentially are doing in this particular case is that we are creating pods for groups of 50 partners, and those pods essentially are then replicated across. And so we essentially have a multiple Kubernetes clusters which are basically running, and based on who the partner is basically, it's basically getting routed to a pod where basically you're getting serviced. So this essentially is what we've been working on, and we now have this basically completed and it's ready. We've basically done performance tests, we've done load tests, and we are basically getting extremely good times right now, and we had to make a lot of changes in order to get there. And so that's what the team has been working on. So we're going to basically start beginning migration of partners starting from tomorrow. we'll be doing 30 partners in a day. So we expect that in the next 3 weeks, we will have migrated everyone onto this new structure. It basically from your perspective, what changes essentially is that when you basically, I'll just very quickly show you what's the new experience. So when you go to the, you will basically be redirected to partnerportal.mycybercns.com. The only thing that you need to essentially enter is basically your domain. So here, basically, we have one of our test domains. And then once you basically, so this basically, for example, if your company and you basically had basically company name here, so that essential company name would come over here. Once basically I click on sign in, what then happens is that based on your company, it basically goes to the appropriate realm. So you're getting redirected to one of the clusters. And within the cluster, again, we have tenant isolation, which basically means that your data is not in one single database, right? So your data is basically kept in a separate structure in a separate database. Your user data is separated. Everything else is separated. So here we basically have, so if I basically, so this basically goes to your, what we call as the realm. And then once it basically goes into that realm, basically your data loads up, and then you can basically see the entire screens. And basically this is essentially how it will change. But the main thing is that you would no longer have your company name over here. And one thing to notice over here is that we've upgraded ourselves to the latest version of OpenSearch, which basically has a lot of cool features which we'll be using as we move forward. We are basically have made certain changes, especially with respect to databases, etc., which will allow us to scale kind of globally, keeping the data residency requirements in place. And so that essentially is kind of where the fundamental change that has happened. And these, once we migrate you over to the new portal, you will be able to use your single sign-on. You will be able to integrate with your Active Directory, either Azure Active Directory or on-prem Active Directory in terms of SAML integrations. And we are basically providing support for multiple OAuth2 providers, basically which includes Okta. So you can basically choose any of the OAuth2 providers. You can essentially integrate with us. Last but not the least, we also have integration with Jump Cloud, which is basically completed. So this is basically change number one that is essentially being rolled out. And this is basically ready for live for everyone to start to get migrated. And we'll basically be sending out an email saying that we are going to migrate you on day one. And then basically you will have a very short downtime based on how much time it takes to take a snapshot so that we can redirect the agents into the new partner, the new instance. And once that is done, we essentially will be we'll be sending a mail that your migration is complete. And so you will basically have a small downtime, basically typically during, well, we were basically looking at any time when none of your schedules are running, and basically when you're not using the system actively. So that's when we basically take a backup and then do a live migration of the system. Okay.
Shiva.
Yeah.
Quick question, 3 people or 4 people. Question is, or statement, this is relevant to hosted SaaS only, right? Not self-hosted.
Yes, it is hosted SaaS. Self-hosted will continue to work the way it continues to.
Okay. And then one person asks or states, hey, I've white labeled my service. This is going to impact me, but I just heard you say, Shiva, we're going to take backups. So should their, you know, their when they log back in, should everything look identical?
Yeah, it would. Just that for the for white labeled pieces, we are basically releasing one piece of one front web page, which essentially will use the white labeled piece, which is because in the when you get into the partner portal, we don't know who you are, right? So if you essentially pass partnerportal.mycybercns.com/ and your company, and you redirect with that company name, then all your customizations will appear and you will basically get back your old screen. So that's something that we worked on, so that in case you don't, you basically want the white labeling, you just basically have to give partnerportal.mycybercns.com/ this. And the second thing is that also we are providing the ability for you to, in case somebody wants to use their vanity URL, we will essentially whitelist your vanity URL in our domain to be able to be hosted in an iframe. And we can host a page for you where basically your page appears and you can essentially use your vanity URL. So this also we've tested, and this is something that we'll be able to provide. But essentially give us a couple of weeks, and then after that, we will essentially be able to provide that to anybody who wants to use their vanity URLs. Of course, if you basically are on-prem, you are on your vanity URL.
And then Shiva, for SAML, is that for SaaS only?
No, that's for on-prem also.
Okay. We're up to date.
Perfect. So that was basically what I wanted to kind of cover in the partner portal quick view. The next thing that I wanted to just quickly cover is that we've been working heavily on the agents. And essentially what we've been doing is that we've kind of gone back and forth in terms of what is the data that we're collecting and how is it useful, and what sense does it make to anybody that is using it. And we're coming up with a couple of things that essentially will help everyone. So the first thing is essentially we now have the ability to pull all the Windows firewall rules across all of your Windows machines and basically kind of present it in a centralized UI. And again, we'll be able to kind of audit those rules to basically say whether they are properly configured, and you can define baselines on them. Second, we basically are pulling all the local users and shares and the data for that. And so essentially you will see all of that data. Complete set of Windows, Linux, and Mac BIOS information. And basically, if any BIOS updates are required, those essentially are being pulled right now. We now have a lightweight agent, which basically audits all the USB access. And we have the ability in the probe to basically fall back to WMI in case the SMB does not work. Because we are seeing a lot of instances where when we try to push the agent, basically it does not seem to work. So we are essentially kind of looking at WMI as a fallback, where if a WMI can be queried on the remote system, we will essentially attempt to get data through that system, and we will basically provide whatever we can through that particular interface. So that is the other piece that we've essentially worked on this week. And then we want to just quickly show you a couple of things which are basically coming in. First is basically the CIS compliance, right? So we have essentially broken down the entire CIS. Basically, this is a report that essentially now gets generated for CIS, and we've been working on this. And there are a lot of items that basically came up with when we built this report, which we basically have incorporated the product. And so basically, we've taken the three implementation groups: implementation group 1, which is the baseline; implementation group 2 and 3, and then you have basically the breakdown in terms of what is the percentage compliance and non-compliance in basically each of those areas. And third is a category which is called manual. Now, what we mean by manual is that these are areas that we cannot essentially automate from our perspective, because they require basically either documentation or whatever that is required in order to essentially get that working. So when you download this report, you just have to go to the ones that say manual and then basically measure the compliance on it. Now, if you actually go into the CIS compliance details tab, so this is essentially the CIS compliance details tab. And then here you can see each of the standards which are basically there. What is the CIS controls? And this is CIS V8. What is the control? What is the safeguard number? What does it apply to? Does it apply to devices or applications, etc.? And then there is a description. And then basically what we have done is that we have the ability to essentially say that what is its compliance in implementation group 1, group 2, and group 3, right? And then in case it is something that we cannot determine. So for example, this For example, it says ensure that a process exists to address unauthorized assets on a weekly basis. The enterprise may choose to remove the asset from the network, deny the asset from connecting remotely, or quarantine the asset. Now, at this point of time, we do not have integrations built in for the EDR systems, and so we essentially mark this as manual. But we are hoping that as we went through this, there's a lot of things that we got in. For example, this is one thing that we found interesting, and you will essentially see this coming up. One is the lightweight agents will essentially, if you're installing it on a DHCP server, it will essentially pull back all the DHCP login, and then it will essentially be able to automate this particular control and basically tell you that DHCP logging is enabled or not enabled. Plus, it will also basically clean up a lot of the data that we have in terms of DHCP leases being lost and basically regained, and IP address changes. So essentially, it works in both cases. So we have a lightweight agent that addresses this. And then once you basically get into this, you see what is it for IG1, IG2. And last but not the least, it essentially talks about what is the evidence, right? So right now, we basically give a link directly into the portal.mycybercns.com portal into the whole thing. So you can click on it and you can log in, and then you will get to that particular page. However, there is basically work that is going on by my team where we can basically take screenshots of this and essentially embed it in here. So that is part 2 of the whole thing, where we are basically going to be able to embed screenshots. And that way, basically, this becomes a comprehensive document, although the size would basically increase. So example of this is like, for example, utilize an active discovery tool to identify assets connected to the enterprise network, configure the active script to execute daily or more frequently. Now, the way we do this is we basically look at your schedules in CyberCNS, and if it basically is configured to run daily, then essentially we basically mark it as compliant, and basically we provide the evidence of the schedule. So these are the ways in which we are doing this, and this is basically being done for all of the assets. This is what you can see basically that for each of these, we basically provide wherever we have the ability to provide the data, we provide the data. The next one is essentially what we talk about non-compliant assets. So this essentially gives you like a matrix saying that this is basically the list of assets that are in there. And this is essentially what standard are they compliant with and what are they non-compliant with. So this again is something that's automatically generated. So in summary, if you look at it, this matrix gives you an overall picture of where you are with IG1, IG2, IG3 compliance. This gives you details of what you're compliant with and what is manual, etc., so that you can fill that up. And the last one essentially gives you from each control perspective, which are the assets you need to attack in order to essentially remediate it and basically get this. And this is the format that we propose that we will follow for all the standards, whether we all of the compliance, so that essentially you have a consistent way in which you're reporting and you're able to get this data out of the system. Okay. So the next thing that I want to quickly cover is that we basically also now upgrading the way that we are doing the assessment report. So if you remember, we had the assessment report, which was a PDF and this, etc. But now we also realize that a lot of people need PowerPoints and other pieces, and they're also upgrading our PowerPoint templates. So these are essentially kind of the new PowerPoint templates that we've created. So this essentially talks about a summary of where we are, what's your grade last month with this one, and then what is your vulnerabilities, what is the number of critical, high, medium, low vulnerabilities. So if you look at it, all of this data was there, but it's essentially that we now basically making it more presentable and more easy for you to use. And then all of the metrics in terms of the key metrics that you want to show in executive, basically immediately kind of visible over here, so that they can essentially look at it and kind of it's at a view thing. Then overview of the vulnerabilities, the summaries, etc. over here. And then what is the trending? How is it been trending for the last 1 month? What is the lookout for the last 1 month, that trending? Then again, with security report card, basically what are the counts of incidents and all of these pieces in the last 1 month. So again, this is another thing. And again, the same with the compliance report card. So, and then basically the full compliance summary in terms of different standards and how basically what is applicable, not applicable, and that whole thing. So this is basically kind of a new template that will also be rolled out. And we are also basically upgrading some of the existing templates where either the data is not making sense or the data is essentially not. So we've been spending a lot of time in trying to basically fix the data, look at what might be wrong with the data, and basically also make some changes to the user interface to essentially make sure that that kind of data does not appear over there. Okay. So I covered two more of the features that we've been working on. And then the last one that we're essentially kind of working on and basically will be shortly releasing, it's a preview, is basically the new user interface that we're basically working on, which is a much more simpler and easier interface to basically talk about. So if you look at the far left corner, this is essentially a place that will be used for your logo and etc. So you will not basically, you can replace our logo over there. You basically have new company and you have basically the ability to switch companies right over here. Plus you have one option which says global. So the menus never change. So unlike with the earlier thing, what we had was, we noticed that people have a tough time in basically navigating between those menus on top, where we basically went from left, right, global to company wide to this, etc. So now we essentially creating this view, which is essentially kind of a single view where you have summaries, which basically talk about everything. And then when you click on assets, you essentially see all the assets. The second thing that we're working on with this whole assets piece, which which will now come into fruition, is that under assets, you will essentially see a breakdown which says which are essentially workstations, which are printers, and you can essentially kind of get filter. You can basically click on those submenu items to essentially get only those things that are relevant for that particular class of items, so that essentially what you see on the right hand side can be tuned to that particular class of systems. And then again, you have vulnerabilities, compliance, and then we have introduced something which is called tasks, which we'll walk through next week, which is basically something where it is basically what is actionable. So while we understand that we have the remediation plan, etc., a lot of people have expressed this thing, the requirement that we need to basically have a task and we need to have time of how long it's going to take to complete that particular task. So things like remediations and even for things like we basically infusing certain things in terms of web security. So all of those essentially will appear under tasks, and then you will be able to, we'll be able to tell you how much time it's going to take to perform that particular task. And you can essentially schedule it, and you can essentially track those tasks to closure. And you can also basically convert these tasks into tickets into your ticketing system. So that's essentially what it is. And again, settings, etc. So if you look at the left-hand side menu, that has been kept consistent. So if you switch between a single company to a global view, then all of the data that is shown to you will essentially start changing on the left-hand side. So you won't basically, the menus will remain the same, but the things will change. A fully responsive design, and this entire new platform is basically built on Flutter. So it allows us to essentially deliver this particular platform on three pieces. One is you can deliver it on the web as we do right now. Second is you can essentially have this as a desktop application, which you can run on your desktop. Third is basically it also gives us the ability to give it to you as a mobile app, which runs on iOS and Android, and will have basically essentially the same features across all the three platforms without any changes. The final thing that I want to essentially kind of walk through is basically the left-hand side, the tags. So one of the things that we have is basically tagging, and it's used, etc. But one of the things that we've been very poor at is basically helping people use the whole tagging feature. So you will be able to kind of drag and drop these tags onto different assets, and basically those tags will get applied. B, you will be able to filter by these tags. So when you basically click on design, only the items that correspond to design will come. And this includes the data that comes into reports, and all of those pieces will essentially be defined by those tags. And of course, the next question which will come is, can I select multiple tags? The answer is yes. So you could basically create a combination of tags and get all of your reporting and all of your data that is visible over here, basically visible by tags. And last but not the least, the final thing that we're working on is something which is called views. So these are basically quick views, which essentially will allow you to kind of go through your day very quickly. So things like, is there basically any computers which do not have, which have unusual number of logins today? So that essentially is a view. So we're going to be basically creating those views so that when you come into the morning, you can essentially click on the view, get a quick overview to see if any of those views have any extra data. And those views will essentially kind of help you kind of navigate the day in terms of what you need to do and what you don't. So in summary, this is what we've been working on. And basically, this is something that we will be bringing to you over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. And you will see these upgrades into the system. So the same system will work for on-prem as well as for mobile, etc. So it will basically be a single unified system.
Great stuff, Shiva. Really great. Some questions. Can I go back and kick them off with you, Shiva?
Sure.
Okay. All right. So all the way back, Luke says, it's been mentioned a few times in the past, but will support be added for vendor-specific update and vulnerability checking? So for example, like Dell, command update, Shiva.
Yes, we are basically looking at Dell, HP, and Lenovo, basically in terms of vendor-specific updates. And we're working with those APIs in order to basically get those updates. We do not expect to basically release it anytime before the mid of May, but basically this is something that our engineering team is constantly working on at this point of time.
Okay, Christopher, since Microsoft has announced WMI is on the way out, will you be thinking about WinRM as well?
So we basically have WinRM support built into the system right now. The problem is that most people have not, because WinRM, in order to enable WinRM, you need to enable what is called the WSMan service, and there is a procedure to do that. And unfortunately, we do not see it anywhere else. And again, what Microsoft said is it's not basically taking out WMI, it is only basically taking out the CLI tool for WMI. They had a CLI tool, and that is the only tool they are removing. But WMI support is going to basically be there for the long term, is basically what Microsoft commitment is.
Okay, Luke, will it be able to, will CyberCNS be able to pull DHCP logging from supported firewalls, FortiGates, for example?
Andrew, could you just repeat the question once, please?
Yeah. So Luke, while Shiva's looking, are you suggesting that this become a logging tool? Like, because again, go ahead, Shiva.
Yeah, that was a question aimed at when he was explaining some of the CIS to have the lightweight agent on your DHCP server, but again, we hand out DHCP from our firewall rather than a domain controller or something like that. So just in terms of the CIS control he was speaking to, he had mentioned that, and I'm just curious if that would be able to pull in from authorized, unauthorized assets from firewalls as well.
So Luke, yes, the answer is yes, we are working on that. Two mechanisms that we are basically working on, and one is essentially we are going to start embedding a syslog collector in the probe, which will essentially pull syslogs from any of the network devices and then look at what IP addresses are basically flowing through it, so that we can essentially kind of report on that. The second, especially with firewalls, second is basically through the APIs of the specific devices. So we are basically working with the APIs of Fortinet, Sophos, because we connect to them already, WatchGuard, and basically Checkpoint. So these vendors that we are already connected to from a firewall compliance perspective, we are expanding those APIs to basically pull traffic details so that we can essentially populate reports of assets that we are not seeing in our system, and then trying to basically figure out what those assets are.
Great, that sounds fantastic. Thanks.
Thanks, Luke. Mark, can you come on and talk about this, the Win30, get Win32 issue?
Yeah,
And is this
sure.
a support issue?
Well, so we noticed we started having an accounting firm, one of their accounting apps just started puking every day. And we finally figured out that by looking at multiple clients, if you look at the app log on any workstation with the lightweight agent, you'll see a whole spew of basically MSI installer source events. And it's basically something was causing a consistency and repair on every application. And I tracked it down. It's a lightweight agent. It's calling, it looks like it's calling the Win32 get products to evaluate what the product list is, like applications installed on the systems. And that's really, really bad. That can take down SQL servers and Exchange servers and all, and in this case, this accounting app. So I opened a support ticket on it and they're working on it, but it was something that just seemed to start not long ago because we haven't seen it happen, since we implemented CyberCNS. And they're working on it, but it is a very big deal. I had to disable CyberCNS for 2 of my accounting firms because, I just can't obviously in accounting season have that going down like that. So just wondering if, Shifa's aware of it and if they're actively working on changing that.
Yeah, Mark. So for the products, basically we've written an alternate path of code where we're basically kind of querying the registries for the 32-bit and 64-bit applications. So it's right now under QA test. So basically in the next day or 2, you will essentially see a version rollout, which will basically remove that requirement.
Okay, perfect.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Shiva. So Larry Gray asked about that really nice assessment report, Shiva, that you showed, the new and enhanced one. When will that be available? So
that will be available starting next week. This week, once we start the migrations, we will basically start the reports and all of that are basically part of it. So you will essentially get migrated to it and you'll start seeing those reports next week.
Got it. Is Vishali on by chance?
Yes, Andrew, I'm very much here.
Hey, Vishali. Mark R says he opened a ticket. Can you communicate to him and just look into that ticket number?
Sure.
It's at 11:23 Eastern time. Simon, hi Shiva. Are you able to provide an update on external scanning? You mentioned that this is an area we want to improve upon. So any thoughts there, Shiva, on external scanning?
So the answer is that we got a little sidetracked with all of these things that were going on with Kubernetes, etc. We basically believe that in the next 7 to 12 days, we will essentially finish the work that we started on the external scanner, and we will be able to basically provide those reports. So in the next week's call, I'll give you an update on the new external scan reports that we are basically going to be displaying.
Are we also changing up, or not just the report, Shiva? Will the actual engine be changing? Do you feel?
It's completely changing because the older engine was basically not identifying applications, etc., accurately. So just to be very clear, the older engine was essentially using the same agent that we had for internal scanning. It was basically repurposed for external scanning, and it was doing a basic set of items. So right now we are rewriting the external scan agent as a proper rescan of the external scan agent. We also basically are incorporating the OWASP top 10 and other web security measures, all of those pieces also into that agent. So that way what happens is it becomes a very comprehensive agent and we can basically generate multiple reports of it.
All right. Mark, is there something, I'm sorry, not Mark, Jeremy, on CIS Control 1. Do you want to come on and is it?
Sure. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. So one of the things that, we've been looking at and trying to figure out is a good way to identify approved versus unapproved assets and how this falls into our configuration management database and everything else. And you guys are really fitting the bill. And with the addition of DHCP, it would be nice to have a toggle on all of the network assets to just say this is an approved asset or not, so that we can review them. When an asset comes online, we can do a security check. Yep, this device belongs to the network or doesn't belong to the network, right? And then that feeds into CIS control one for, being able to approve or not approve assets. So just like a toggle field that, hey, this is approved or not on an asset would be a huge help. Same for software, to be honest with you, because we had the same issue with CIS2 that you're supposed to address approved or not approved software. So just a place to track whether that is an approved piece of software would be.
Would a tag suffice?
Maybe I think the problem with the tag is that it's just not like it needs to be either or, right? And not having a tag to say it's approved might not necessarily fit the bill. Right? Like you got to make a definitive decision. This is an approved device or not. And I'm not sure forgetting to have put a tag on there might not.
So how are you suggesting, like, what would you envision?
Andrew,
Like,
I think we should basically have, Jeremy, I will just state it and you. So we have a list of the assets, right? So we'll give you a toggle which says whether it's approved or not approved. And if it is essentially approved, we will basically take your login as the person who approved it and at what time you approved it. So we'll record these three pieces. And then we'll also give you a mechanism by which you can say that you're approving on behalf of somebody else who's there, because it might not be your login exactly. And the same with applications too. So would that work, Jamin?
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
There we have it. Adam, are you just making a comment on external scans, or is there a question?
No, it was just following up from the previous question above mine regarding external scanning.
Okay.
Which
okay, that you were looking forward to you're the new and improved external scan.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. Eric, is there a way, or will there be a way, to filter the list of assets by type or tag or other methods so we can only see servers or devices with a certain grade, etc.?
Yes, that's essentially what I pointed out, that we basically have those, we'll have subcategories for different types of assets. Second is that we didn't think of grade, but we basically will get grade. And I think people like Adam will have this thing, this will be useful. We're basically introducing the concept of equivalent of what is called a cloud shell. So you will be able to run normal queries, basically say that I want to select all assets where grade is equal to A or B, etc. And you will be able to get a dump of all of that. And then you can essentially choose to basically send that data over either any of the communication means. So that is essentially something that you're building into the tool, so that it is not just basically that you have to go through the UI, but you can run this whole cloud shell that you want to do.
Got it. All right. So Frank or Ian says we've got two feature requests. I'm assuming it's Frank or Ian. Snooze/suppress is the first, Shiva. 14 days isn't enough time. Suppress should be separate. How does 14 days work for false positives? So that's request one. And then remediation plan, network scan vulnerabilities should include option to export company-wide, including an asset field.
Yep. So the export is easy. Snooze suppress will basically make it configurable. So you can basically choose how long you want to suppress it for, or we'll basically make it based on severity. You can choose, you can set up a policy for severity. And then because the last time around, I think we all discussed and we said basically 14 days is sufficient time, but as you're mentioning, it's not sufficient time, then we'll essentially make it a configuration parameter that you can set in your instance.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Hey, it's Ian here. Yeah, so we were just looking at it, it's almost like snooze and suppress need to be different. where we would like to be able to suppress, a particular, we're definitely not going to upgrade this person's AutoCAD version, and we just want to suppress this forever. We don't necessarily, we want to assume that risk and not have just 14 days expire and then it show back up, and then, us having to constantly reset that, clock. But some apps, Cisco VPN client or something, for sure, we would maybe want to snooze that because, for whatever reason. So that was our thought there. Maybe separating the snooze suppress out. And then while we were going through remediation plans and whatnot, it would be cool for not just only remediation plans, but network scans and vulnerabilities, if we could actually just, up at the top right, just an export, and then all of the things in a spreadsheet, with that asset being the, the separator there. So that was what we had. Right now, you have to go into each asset in order to be able to look at the installed software and whatnot, and then be able to just download a spreadsheet for it. So that's why we were saying, this would be cool if we could do this company wide. So that was our two.
Yeah, we'll do
Thanks.
both at the company-wide level at the global level also. So in the global level, you will get it with the company name. At the company level, you will essentially get it with the company name and the asset name. So
is that something that's coming, or is that something I can already do?
I will basically get this added so that you can see this tomorrow. Yeah, so.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Thank you.
Okay. So Shiva, Jason's mentioning PCI DSS, by the way, any update for us in that realm? Because I get a lot of questions on that, Shiva. And then he's saying, scan now, breakdown by device IP, so one can filter the scan by site, subnet, or device type OS. We asked for this change and got it in a few days. Okay, you're just making a comment. But anything new on PCI, Shiva, while we are on that subject?
No, we have submitted our scan results to the PCI DSS to become basically the PCI DSS approved scanner. So I'm waiting for the response back from the certification agency. That's essentially where we are at this point of time.
Got it. Eddie, feature request. One thing that we really liked about Network Detective was that it would pull service account logon names, so we could flag services that were using admin accounts. Thoughts on that, Shiva? That's
basically part of the local users, administrators, and service accounts. That basically is a report plus basically to be there in each asset.
Is it? I'm sorry. So is it? Forgive me if
part of the. No, it's part of the new. Like if you remember the previous slide, I basically talked about this. So I'm just going to go back to that slide very quickly. So this local users, basically, it will take a look at all the local users plus any users basically who are logged in as services, service accounts, and shares. All of that data will be pulled back and basically provided both in reports as well as along with the asset.
All right. 1 minute here. Steve's is a comment. And Simon asked about last log. I'm just looking at your list, Shiva. Will that give last logged in user?
Yeah, so I can basically get the last logged on user, but this will be for lightweight agents. For probe-based systems, how frequently would you like us to basically pull this? That's basically the question, right? Because at the end of the day, we have schedules that are set up. Now in lightweight agents, I can detect somebody logging in and I can basically send that info over. But with probes, I'll have to basically, again, go to the remote systems and pull the data.
So maybe you guys just towards the bottom, if you could just throw in what kind of time frame per Shiva's, so I can keep on the questions list here, throw out some ideas out on time frames. That would be great. And then Shiva, we can kind of get to that back in a minute. Okay, so Tim, is there a way to create a vulnerability report for only selected devices, Shiva?
Yes, that's what I said. We can essentially, you can create tags and you can create a vulnerability report of this. And then the second is that we are creating the ability to select a group of devices and create a group for those devices. And the group essentially is again a different type of tag, and you can essentially create vulnerability reports only for that group.
Okay. Jeremiah, V1 platform at simple network. Okay, Jeremiah, V1 had the V1 platform, Shiva, had a simple network share report.
That's the same thing. Local users, shares, all of that data essentially is basically coming back.
Got it. Brian, how do we handle compliance that shows you are out of compliance but are managing? All right, Brian, I'm going to ask you to come on if you could.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Part of your compliance report, like I do a lot of HIPAA compliance, and it shows that your automatic updates are out of compliant. It's non-compliant. So, and we manage it ourselves. So when we want to do a reboot, we have a schedule reboot, we have schedule one of the installs, and the report's constantly showing that we're not in compliant. So the question is, how can we, in other words, show it is compliant and we're taking the responsibility of that without sending a report showing it is out of compliant?
So,
if your RMM tool and PSA tools are doing it.
Yep. So just as we have suppress or snooze for vulnerabilities, can we basically add an override function for compliances where you basically can go into any compliance and say override, and you essentially say, even though it's non-compliant, you can say it's compliant, and then you give a reason for why it is compliant, and then we will essentially take that non-compliance off that list. Would that work for you?
Yeah, yes. Is that already in the tool now or no?
No, it is not there. I will basically, we'll add it.
Okay, that would be great, because there's a lot of things I'm showing out of compliant, and my customers would be asking, why am I not if you're managing it? So that'd be great. The second question on the bottom here, are you able to show password policies for workgroup computers yet?
Yeah, we show password policies for workgroup computers already. Are you finding a problem with it?
Yes, I've made a couple of requests, and they said, no, it's only for domain controllers that you show password policies.
I will check on this, because I think we do it for all systems. So there is no thing of domain controllers. I think maybe they didn't understand the question. I will get this checked out.
Thank you.
Vishali, can you just tee this up to me tomorrow, because this is already supported. So I need to understand why it is not working.
Sure, sir. I'm noted it.
We have a few endpoints. Bear with me, guys. I'm just reading. We have a few endpoints that are in scope, quote unquote, for a client, although we can scan everything we need to create a. Tim, is that a question?
Yeah, that was just a continuation of my other one. We scan the entire organization, but only 2 devices are in scope, and they want me to have automated weekly generated vulnerability report to send to them every week on those 2 devices.
So Tim, that's basically part of the whole tagging piece that I'm putting together.
Yeah.
So even in the schedule, you can choose only these assets with this tag alone will basically be a scheduled reporting. So that way, only those assets will be included in the reports.
Perfect. So I'm assuming at some point you'll do a demo of how to set that all up, or should I just go in there and fumble around and figure it out?
No, next week I'll be demoing it to you folks here.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Okay. So just some comments, Shiva, on the days for last login. I've seen, like Luke's comment was, will it show last login time for the list of users? Some compliance standards want accounts suspended if not used after a certain time, like 30, 60, 90. Jeremy says weekly probably for that. We need to know when the 30-day marks cross pretty quickly. Those are the two comments on time frame, Shiva, so far.
Not a problem. So we can essentially create two reports for those particular pieces, which essentially will be live updated to basically say when that mark is crossed. And it'll be a simple report which essentially says which machine, what is the user, and how long has he not logged in, and when it crosses the threshold. So essentially you can see that data. And basically the base time that we'll keep is 30 days. Anything beyond 30 days, we will report. So you can essentially see, we'll bucketize it to say that it's between 30 to 60, and then 60 to 90, and greater than 90. So that way you see 3 tables and you can basically act on them.
Okay. Is there a feature request board or something that we can review? Jordan, you can just simply submit a feature request to support at cybercns.com. I think Shiva, the last count, Shiva, keep me honest here, there's hundreds, right, of feature requests. So we go based on, number of requests for it, etc. So support at CyberCNS is your best way to do that. Comments on last login. Can I access this record? Yeah, Michael, I'll put the URL for where you can get all the partner calls momentarily. In regards to making things compliant manually, can't those have a lifetime of a year? So they must be revisited and make sure it doesn't fall. This is Sean Murphy, fall off or never get verified again, Shiva?
So we'll essentially, when you're saying override, the same thing like snooze will tell you how many days do you want to snooze to basically mark this as compliant. So once you give the number of days, you can choose 30 days, 90 days, whatever you want, and then it will basically pop back up after that to you.
Awesome. Tim, thanks for your comment. Shiva, would you mind just taking that Jeremy's last comment here at 11:55? I'm just going to get the recording URL if you wouldn't mind.
So actually, Jeremy, we already fixed this, and this was actually brought to our notice by Dennis Hausneck, and we basically I think one was basically last log on time, and one is basically last log on timestamp, and we essentially kind of do it from the last log on timestamp, which is the more accurate piece.
All right, thanks, Shiva. And the URL to see all partner calls is in there. MS, how difficult to produce the MSI version? How difficult to produce? Dennis, can you come on? I
can answer Dennis' question. Not at all difficult. We'll basically take the Windows exe and convert it into MSI and basically start posting it next week, Dennis.
Awesome. All right, a few minutes left here, folks. Any other questions that you may have?
So my only request is, folks, you will actually see emails from contact@cybercns.com asking you for permission that we will migrate you. My request is that the way we're going to do it is we're going to send it to you and say that we're going to migrate you between this time and this time. If you have an objection, reply back to us. If you have none, then basically you don't need to reply, because waiting for anyone to reply becomes very difficult for us when we are so time bound. So in case you cannot allow us to do the migration because you have a meeting the very next day or whatever it is, do reply back to that email and let us know. Otherwise, we'll essentially be proceeding with the migration as it is.
Excellent. By the way, comments from Eddie and folks, Shiva, it's all Shiva and the team, Eddie. So thank you for putting me in there, but it's the folks behind the scenes that are doing all the hard work. For people like Prashali and a bunch of developers that are just working night and day. Okay. Do on-prem installs auto update, or do we have to update, Shiva?
It'll auto update.
Auto update. Okay. Awesome. I think we're good, Shiv. Fantastic job to you and the team, as always, and the hard work. Shiva, so we'll have a partner call next Wednesday?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Everybody have an awesome week. We'll look forward to seeing you all out there, either chat or emails or Slack or whatever it is. So until then, everybody make it a great day.